Shalom, shalom, and boker tov. Many who have emailed me in response to the question that I posted on Authentic Judaism and other Jewish sites as well. And the question I posted was, if you were part of a Beit Din and assume you qualify to sit on it and to decide the status of a potential convert to Judaism. The candidate passes every area of study flawlessly and knows the required areas of Jewish law and blessings that is supposed to know, and openly rejects all form of idolatry and shituf. Those of you who don't know what shituf is use a mediator between them and God, and provides how will you decide. Now, keep in mind, the question has a two-sided question here. Provide how will you decide if you are Dayan on this Beit Din with the following scenarios. Now, the candidate approaches the Beit Din, openly declares his view that he believes in XYZ as Mashiach. Now, when making reference to Mashiach, this is the concept of Mashiach ben David, and follows him and vows to follow him even afterwards. Now, keep in mind, this Mashiach could be anyone. This could have been JC, could be Bar Kokhba, it could be Shabbatai Zvi, Franco. In our history, there's been many Mashiachs, and people still follow failed Mashiachs till this day, and follows him. Candidate hides his or her belief in that he follows X, Y, and Z as his Mashiach, and you find out about it as a Dayan after hearing him or her open declaration. How well do you decide? And based upon that, how would you approve or disapprove the persons for the conversion to Judaism? So the question was very non-instigating, as it were, but it brings about a couple of factors. One is the idea of rejecting a candidate because he or she believes that X, Y, and Z is Mashiach. I didn't say whether the Mashiach in their concept was God in the flesh, or clothed in human form, or basically only at the concept that he happens to be the Mashiach, the Messiah, on a potential level. Now, you have a couple of scenarios that take place. Interesting enough, one rabbi responded to me privately. He's from Israel, and he works with the Rabbanut. And I've also submitted the same question to other area Beit Dins to see how they would respond. And so far, most decided not to respond because a couple of them, I know they have had this situation. And so my response in my answer to get clarification to the question is basically based upon already previous decisions made by different Beit Dins. Obviously, there is a bias. As a matter of fact, one of the rabbis that was working on Beit Din said to me, well, I had a couple of cases of Messianic rabbis and leaders of their community who wanted to convert to Judaism, and no Beit Din here in Israel would convert them because he still embraced the idea that although JC was not in his mind God or anything like that, or the concept of Elokist, nevertheless, because he embraced the idea of a failed Messiah who was a big problem for Jewish history, they rejected his conversion. On another case where the situation was not about JC, it was about another person of more recent history, and this was well publicized, and there was a man out of Israel that went to Kfar Chabad, and Kfar Chabad brought him to a Beit Din in Israel, and to convert. And this gentleman said exactly what I just posted. They rejected his conversion based on the notion that we are to have complete faith and trust in Hashem and Hashem only, and not what he had learned, unfortunately, with the camp of Mashiachists in Israel, embracing the whole concept of even the Elokist mentality, and as a result was also rejected for conversion. So now there is a consistency throughout many Beit Dins throughout the country, that if a person does embrace embrace the concept of a failed Messiah that did not become materialized, that person's, because he's using the Messiah concept as a go-between, as a shituf, he or she will be rejected for conversion to Judaism. Better off they stay where they're at in their belief of a failed Messiah than to join the Jewish people. We already have enough problems with what we have now. How much more so? Now it's interesting because here locally, I mentioned that Beit Din in South Florida had done this, did not go through the proper processes, as it were, to ensure that the candidate did deny all forms of idolatry. Although they may have said it, they tried in their minds to justify it. No, no, I don't believe in Jesus. And later came out saying, no, I believe in Yahushua. That type of game is completely looked at differently from the Beit Din side than that of the candidate themselves. The candidate really thought, well, I don't believe that he's God, and therefore, I don't believe in what you guys think is Jesus. I believe in Yahushua as my Rebbe, as my rabbi who I follow. And so this becomes a very important play. And this is why I posted this issue, because I had a lot of responses from different rabbis who do sit on different Beit Dins throughout the country. And I would say that unanimously, they all had the main thrust, with one or two differences in regards that they see that the Chabad Mashiachistic camp is, as it were, an exception to the case. And there was only one or two Beit Dins that responded back on that. That way, it's a little bit different because we don't hold this or we don't that. And it's because mainly that those Beit Dins had rabbis who were of Chabad, who understood the complexities of the issues in that question. But by and large, most Beit Dins will reject a person who holds the belief that their failed Messiah, and I mean failed by the Rambam's definition of failed, that he didn't materialize. He was just another potential king of the line of David that could have been, should have been, would have been, but failed. So please don't take offense of this. And I agree with the Israeli rabbinate on that decision that they made with that candidate in Kfar Chabad, that he was rejected because he embraced the Mashiachistic notion that his Rebbe was the Mashiach. Now, interesting enough, Aaron Pinkas made the mention about Rabbi Akiba, that Rabbi Akiba would have been rejected, not necessarily, because Rabbi Akiba believed that Bar Kokhba was the promised Mashiach, because he did rule, after all, 2 years in Jerusalem. That's something that none of the other failed messiahs were able to accomplish. So there is more of an exception to the rule in his case, where in fact, after 2 years of showing and demonstrating that he in fact took over Jerusalem and won against the enemies of Israel, the Romans, and pushed them off for 2 years, is quite an accomplishment. But at the end of his life, unfortunately, at the end of his life, he realized he made a mistake when Bar Kokhba went after his nemesis. Who was his nemesis? Interesting enough, there's a mention that his nemesis was Yeshua HaNotri. So he must have been around still during the time of Bar Kokhba, or his Talmidim were still pushing on the notion that Yeshua was going to be the one who's going to rule. Now this is interesting, because once he's in a power play, in a political position of rulership as a monarch, then the game rules change. And then, my friend, in that case, this was where you may find an exception to the case if Rabbi Akiba would have converted. But even at that case, it would have been transferred over to the Sanhedrin, who had at that time been pushed over or moved over to the area of Tiberias, where today now there is a reconstituted Sanhedrin, which right now most Israel doesn't recognize. But in any case, one thing we need to know very clear: most Beit Dins throughout the conversion process that's recognized by Israel will not, should not, I believe, accept anyone who holds a notion that their failed Messiah is Mashiach, and then allow them to go through the conversion process, because we should have a complete faith in Hashem and Hashem only, and not put our trust in men. As it says in scriptures, in the Torahs and the sages, Cursed is the man who puts his faith in the Son of Man. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero, and that's a response to the question that I posted. Shalom, shalom.